All right, good morning, everyone. You're welcome to this special Cyber Safe Foundation Masterclass. If you're excited, just put some fire emojis in the chat box. Just say you're excited. Just say hello. Let's see the chat box fill up. Yes, hello. It's so lovely to be here again. So if your cyber sisters and your other cyber fellows, PCSL, if you are not on the chat already, you're not in the if your cyber fellows, if your cyber brother or sister is not here, you can just feel free to buzz them, send a Slack message, WhatsApp message, put a call through to them, whatever. Just make sure everyone join us here today. So let's make sure everyone is here before I introduce the guests for the day. All right, I see your messages. Thank you so much. I can see all of the excitement. So I'm just going to go straight up and introduce our guest for today. Like I said, it's someone special, and he's a friend of the family. Okay, so Ayodele Olusola is a cybersecurity professional with experience in the security, audit, and compliance domain. He's currently the Senior Director of Cybersecurity at 54Gene. I'm sure most of us know 54Gene, but for those who do not know, 54Gene is a health technology company centered on advancing the field of African genomics to unlock scientific discoveries as well as improve diagnostic and treatment outcomes within Africa and the global community. So there are no jokes, there are no small boys in the game. Olusola has over 14 years of experience within level degree in forensics and system security from the University of Greenwich, London. So I want us with so much joy and excitement to welcome Olusola as he speaks to us today. Just put this round of applauses in the chat box. Just scream if you want to scream. Say it. Do whatever you feel like doing. Hi, Olusola. It's nice to have you here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to be here.
Yes. I think I should just drop this there. I think 54Gene last year had one of our fellows. So they are a friend of the family. They have tested part of the work we do here, and it's so awesome to have you on the program today with us. Thank you so much. So I get it that you have a lot of goodies and wisdom and nuggets, with knowledge nuggets here and there. So I'm just going to let you do your thing.
Okay. Let me just see how I can share the few slides that I have.
All right. While you're at it, your mentees are sending love in the chat box.
Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I don't mind. All right, let me see how to do this. Share screen. Desktop one. Can you all see my screen?
Oh, yes, we can.
And I'm not sure if I'm sharing the right screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see an insight into the temperatures in healthcare industry. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, beautiful. So thank you all once again. Thank you for having me. I love any opportunity where I get to, speak with people about my experience. And it's not because, I know it all or I've been in the industry the longest. I've seen people with 25, 30, 35 years, and I'm like, wow, what kind of cybersecurity were you people doing back then? But yeah, it's one of the nuggets I always like to put out there. That's the only way to really grow. You need to network with different people, in your space and find the right mentors to help you grow. So basically, I'm going to start with like a little bit of an intro about myself, because I talk when I'm introduced or when I talk to some people and then they see all the years of experience and everybody's just like, oh wow, wow, wow. But I didn't just drop. I didn't drop from another planet. Everybody, we all put in the work. Plus, we also have normal lives. It's not every day that we're threat hunting or fighting bad guys or hardening devices and firewalls. So like I said, I'll just start with the basics about myself. I'll try and run through this quickly so I don't waste your time. Since they say this is the TikTok generation, so everything has to be short and sweet. So formally, this is me. My name is Olusola Ayodele, but I prefer to be called Shola, not Mr. Shola, not Mr. Ayodele, just, Shola, which is fine. And I am currently the Senior Director of Cybersecurity in a company called 54 Gene. The company has already been introduced, but yes, I'm not speaking on behalf of the company. My thoughts and opinion are purely mine. But the company is, because a lot of people ask me, they try and see the correlation. Why, we understand cybersecurity in banks, we understand cybersecurity in manufacturing and some other places, but cybersecurity in a healthcare organization. But yes, there definitely is the need for it. And you will see, as we proceed, because the company is referred to as a genomics company, meaning we are involved in genomics testing, basically with genetic testing. And the ultimate goal is to improve healthcare services, specifically for the African population. But before I get too deep into all of that, let me continue with with the introduction of myself. When I am not Senior Director of Cybersecurity, I am, husband and father, and I try to spend time with my family because cybersecurity can drive you mad, can wake you up very early, can keep you up late at night, but it's the thrill. It's part of the thrill that drives us, but it's all about the work-life balance. So try and find that balance. Also, when I'm not doing that, I take time to spend time with myself on the road. So I ride a motorcycle. That's Yamaha. It's called a Yamaha Tracer 900. And, I just like to tour, within the city, within town. And I believe I've been riding for about 14, 15, about 15 years now. There are lots of stories around that, but we will discussions for another day. And also, when I'm not on the road doing that, I like to spend my time in my backyard. I love food. I love grilling. So I take my time. I do lots of grills. I host people. So if you're ever in my town, please stop over and let's eat. Yep, every other thing about me is food. So let's leave that and jump into the main reason why we're here. Can everybody hear me though?
We can hear you now, but you broke up for a bit there.
Oh, okay. At what point did you lose me?
I think just the sentence before you say, let's go back into what we're about to do. That was the last thing we had. But it's fine. You can carry on. You can carry
Oh,
on.
okay, great. So yeah, all that was just, background stuff, just to let a brief insights into my life outside cybersecurity. So this is pretty much why we're here, to discuss cybersecurity and healthcare. So cybersecurity in healthcare is a major concern for several categories of people, for businesses, for individuals, for governments, for regulators. And, I think the reasons are becoming more and more obvious. The truth is, wherever you have data, it becomes a huge concern. Even personally, sometimes I look at my mobile phone, and I have so much data on it. I have files, I have photographs, documents, and it becomes concerning to say, what's going to happen if I lose all of this? The space on my local drives are full. My cloud, the space on my cloud drives are full. I now need to start paying for additional space. So definitely, and that is me, one individual. So how much more a hospital or a healthcare facility? So think about the kind of data that we're collecting. There's the basic one, which is that you're collecting things like, names, phone numbers, addresses, depending on where you are, social security numbers, national ID cards, and things like that, photographs as well. And then there's the deeper side of it, where you now start collecting genetic information. You're drawing blood, you're doing tests, you're taking tissue samples, blood samples, all sorts of samples. And the interesting thing, with those kind of things is it's not just that item itself that is being collected. It is what you're able to deduce from it, the result of all those tests that you're carrying out. So you do the test. There some of this, some people go, to these facilities to do like paternity tests. And these are things that you don't want to be out. You might not want to be out in the public. So take, for example, you've gone to do paternity tests to realize that who you thought was your parent is not your parent. And it's something you want to keep to yourself. But then that is breached and exposed and then put on a forum somewhere. So that's an example, just to let you know how sensitive these things are. Sometimes you can do tests to find out allergies, what you're allergic to. And so if, for example, you do a test and then they list that you actually have serious allergies, and a particular substance, if you're exposed to it for too long, can, kill you. And then you're someone who doesn't like you very much gets a hold of that information, and he's like, oh wow, brilliant. And then he gets that substance, and then he finds a way to put it in your presence, and then maybe your arteries or your lungs clog up, and then you die. So basically, this is just to help you see why cybersecurity is important here. We see the attacks, we see the breaches, it happens everywhere. People are struggling to secure patients' information. I might have a couple of stats that we'll review in a second. And just so you know, because these attackers, people usually think that, if they wanted to hit somewhere, you would hit a bank or a financial institution because there's money. But it's not necessarily about, the money, the dollars and the pounds, or, whatever currency. It's about the value. Because if you can't get the money directly, then you get the money as an exchange for something valuable, which is why in the case where you have kidnappers, kidnappers are not money. I can't rob a bank, but maybe I can grab somebody and then tell his family to give me millions of dollars in exchange for that life. So it's wherever there's value. And in the healthcare industry, definitely there's value. cyber crimes endangering patients, definitely. And I think I have a couple of examples, as part of my slide to see where that happens. But I mean, even without, I guess we can all just figure it out. You have somebody on a life support machine that is helping, that machine is helping that person to breathe. That machine needs to be available, probably 247, definitely 247. And the cyber attack hits. I don't want to go further, but yeah, we all know the consequences. I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, so this talks about the importance of cybersecurity in healthcare, which is kind of like, I mean, I've talked on a couple of things already. The population is growing fast, so an efficient cure is key. It is growing, and the need for the need for more research into like diseases and to improve healthcare in general and to come up with precision medicine is definitely there. In fact, even with the advent of COVID, it's like opened the eyes of experts in the field of healthcare that there's so much more they should be doing, to research on and come out with solutions so we don't find ourselves in the kind of situations where we found ourselves during COVID. Then it saves the industry millions of dollars. And this is because when you are breached, there are things that you usually could have done proactively, but now you're going to be in reactive mode. And reactive mode is definitely more expensive. If you are breached and you've lost data or your infrastructure has been damaged, then you need to start rebuilding. And that is very expensive because to build it in the first place was expensive. Now you need to rebuild, and then you need to rebuild in a version 2 mode, meaning you need to put all the enhancements that you missed out in the first place. So that's definitely costly to you. And this is just talking about money, It is particularly important to patients. It's important to me. It's important to you. Why is it important to patients? So for example, I think for the first maybe 15 to 18 years of my life, I went to just one hospital. So when you think about the amount of information that hospital has about me, let's not even go into the fact that these days the info is pretty much transferable. If you go to a new hospital, they can ask for the history, and the previous one can share some of that history with them. So, I mean, after collecting this amount of data I'm definitely concerned. I don't want a hospital or a healthcare facility to keep my data unsecured or, not have security best practices in place around the protection of my personal information. So it's definitely important to me. Plus, there are several cases where, I mean, if this legally, you will be in the position to, take that company to court if your personal information has been disclosed due to their negligence, so to speak. So they don't want that. Then the final point is that the leaked patient information can be costly. It definitely will be costly because there are huge fines because of the regulators behind it. So the regulators will fine you, and it's not small money. Apart from the regulators fining you, like I said, in cases of litigation where you're being taken to court, so if you have hundreds of thousands of patients and their files have been breached and exposed, you're not just looking at one person. It's going to be like a class action, a group of people taking you to court, and it's just, you don't want to think about, that's not what you want to do, especially for a hospital. A hospital is here to save lives, or a healthcare facility, research facility. They're here to do research to solve the problems that we're having, find a cure for cancer, find a cure to COVID or monkeypox or other important things. their business is not to, go to court, and, nobody wants to do that. So we'll just move on. Interestingly, the most common attack vectors in the healthcare industry are pretty much almost the same as what you have in any other industry. Ransomware. I'm sure we all know about ransomware. Insider threats, social engineering attacks. These are the same things. Why? Because there is a uniqueness in the kind of system, in some of the systems that we in healthcare use. So not everything, like all my life, most of the systems I dealt with, it's either like a workstation, it's a Windows machine, it's a MacBook, it's Linux, and, all of that. But then when you get into the healthcare space, you start seeing machines that you've, never heard about, or you never figured might be on a network. Some X-ray machines, heart rate monitors. We even have smart devices. Like, there is another topic which I will try not to go into, but that it's the internet of medical things. So we're still dealing with the internet of things, but now we're going into the internet of medical things, where you have smart devices that are online, communicating to push out data in real time and, take actions, health-related actions. So, like I said, these are still the main vectors that we have. Ransomware. There have been so many ransomware cases. These attackers don't care. They're not reviewing your profile to say, oh, it's a hospital, they're doing good work out there, so let's exclude them. They'll create a whitelist for you. No, they're not going to do that. They need to hit as many people as possible and hope for the best possible outcome for them, of course. So whether you're a hospital, whether you're a human rights activist, I don't know, whether you're a church, they will attack you. And if you pay them the ransom, that's it. And as a matter of fact, there are statistics to show that there were hospitals that were breached, they were hit with ransomware. They paid the attacker and they got the decryption keys, got all their data back, and then they were hit again. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, like I said, these are the common attack vectors here. Insider threat, meaning there's somebody on the inside who is not upholding the best interest of the organization. And some of these things are inevitable, but of course, organizations can try to ensure that they don't have disgruntled staff. You can't please everyone, and there are controls that you can also put in place to try and minimize things like that, but there are cases, I mean, even recently, there were cases where your competitors can approach your staff and maybe offer them money and tell them to just plug in a USB or download a file, and that they shouldn't worry, their file will do the rest, and then they give you money. And then, of course, there's social engineering attacks. We've heard it. I think everybody has heard it. Children here. It's what cybersafe is big about, this kind of awareness, but it is still like one of the biggest vectors. People will try and phish you. They will try and get information from you. Sometimes they'll do it electronically. Sometimes they will even do it in person. If they can come close to you, they'll try and find out about what you have within your system, within your environment, and they'll use all of that to build, your profile and attack you. So let's move on. Here are some stats just to give us an insight into what's happening. So hospitals account for 30% of all large data breaches. This might be shocking to some people, but yes, it is true. More than 2,100 healthcare data breaches have been reported in the US since 2009. Now, I know this number doesn't seem large. 2,100 is, it's not large. But when you think or when you remember that most people do not report breaches, then you'll know that the actual figure might actually be 50 times this. We have that kind of, oh well, when I was in the financials, when I worked in the financial industry in Nigeria, we also had that kind of mechanism where all the CISOs came together in the CBN CISO forum, and the whole idea was for us to share information. And one of the requirements was that, oh, if you're breached or you have, critical incidents, that you share. But at least when I was there, I know, people weren't sharing. And I had spoken to a couple of CISOs as well. And I was like, I know there's no way that in 6 months you didn't have an incident. And, they would say things like, oh, they actually approached maybe their executives to say, let's share this. But the executives would say no, because nobody wants to be in the public eye. It will affect the confidence in your services. If you have stakeholders, it will affect stakeholder services. It could lead to reputational damage, but it is the right thing to do, to disclose. But like I said, so when you look at this figure of 2,100, it's way more than that. 18% of teaching hospitals reported that they had experienced a data breach. Like I said, they're not a respecter of person. Teaching hospitals, there you are, 6% of pediatric hospitals. Pediatric hospitals are hospitals that specialize in treating children. So imagine they're treating kids that are suffering from all sorts of diseases, cancer, and things like that. But these attackers do not care. They're still going to attack. 34% of healthcare data breaches come from unauthorized access and disclosures. It's a huge problem, and not just in healthcare, anywhere. So, for those of you that are going into the industry, or if some of you already are in the industry, and not just healthcare, I mean cybersecurity in general, this is a key place to look at. Unauthorized access. Most of us grant access to users and to third parties, and that's the end. We never review it again. Most standards, cybersecurity standards, risk management standards, mandate you to review that access. Because you would have people who would pass through your organization, they would leave, resign, and nobody would check those credentials that they're still active. Administrators, super admins would leave. Third parties is a huge one. You partner with different organizations to do stuff for you. Sometimes you give them access to your environment. When that deal is over, who goes back to check to say, okay, this organization has left, they no longer collaborate with us, let's revoke their access. So that's what these bad guys like target sometimes, to get this kind of credentials. By the end of 2021, security breaches cost $6 trillion for healthcare companies. I don't even want to start to break that down. 6 trillion is definitely huge. So we'll just leave it at that and be very afraid. Now, this last point is probably the saddest for me, because it says tragically, 24% of attacked hospitals note a rise in mortality rates following a cyber attack. And that is where we have gone. That is where we are now. Because we're talking about devices that support human life, that keep you alive, that help you breathe, that administer doses of treatments to people. Those, they need like 100% availability. So when you attack those kind of, facilities, you encrypt their data, then that's the end of the road for whoever was attached to a machine that has its files encrypted. So let's just move on. What makes healthcare a prime target? I think we pretty much covered it, because valuable information. All the data I've mentioned is valuable. Even if I don't know what I'm capturing, I just know that there's no how. This hospital's data must be valuable. So if I'm able to get into their database or wherever they store their data, I'm going to hold it. I'm speaking as, hypothetically as a threat actor, as a bad guy. I'm going to hold this information and make them pay for it. because I also know that we have several regulators out there who mandate you to put in security controls. And I know that the fines are huge. And I know most people would rather pay me to get their data back than pay those fines. So, like there is HIPAA, like in the US, there's HIPAA specific for healthcare. There is GDPR that, mandates how you store data of EU citizens. There's NDPR in Nigeria that also mandates how you manage the data for, Nigerian citizens. And there are fines attached to non-compliance to those regulatory requirements. So if as an attacker, I know that you're going to be fined, I also know that you can, pay me if you don't want to be fined. Now there is the aspect of non-secure medical devices. This sometimes is by design. And when I say by design, I mean, I don't mean they intentionally designed a non-secure medical device. But we need to understand that the intent or the reason why these devices were created were not originally it wasn't a matter of security. The business of healthcare is usually to save lives, to improve, life outcomes and things like that, or for better living. So that is their primary focus. We need this to monitor somebody's heart rate or administer insulin, things like that. They don't want to start thinking about how to encrypt the data, but that is where we are now. So the things they did in the past that worked for them, when I say for them, I mean the healthcare sector, cannot apply anymore. These threat actors are moving, they're moving fast. Anything that can be broken will be broken. Anything that can connect to a network, that can connect to the internet, will be attacked. Because even if you cannot steal the data, you might even be able to just disrupt the activity. You might be able to successfully, pull a denial of service or something like that. So I have a few examples, I think, around non-secure medical devices, which we can talk about. It even reminds me of my experience. Like I said earlier, when I started working, I worked in several places. So when I started, interestingly, the first place I worked when I finished school was in a hospital. I worked in a hospital for a year, and then I moved on to work in telco. And from telco, I moved into consulting. From consulting, I moved back into telco, and then I entered the financial space for about 6-7 years. And all those times, there weren't really a lot of specialty devices. It was the usual. You're securing the workstation. What am I going to do? Maybe I put in a host-based firewall, endpoint security. I harden Windows or Linux or or MacBook, whatever. And then on the server side, the same thing. Maybe you throw in file integrity monitoring. You have the same endpoint security. On the network side, you put in your firewalls, your intrusion prevention systems. But when you move into healthcare, you see devices that you can't access it. You can't RDP into it. You can't install anything on it. Some of them have operating systems that are embedded in them. You can't upgrade the operating system, and you would see things like Windows XP running on those things. So how do I manage this? How do I evaluate it? So like I said, I remember a vendor coming to me to sell a network access control device to help me inventory my solutions. And I'm like, this is not going to work for me because my solutions are now beyond what they were traditionally. It's not just, Windows and MacBooks. I have funny devices, all sorts of devices now. I have medical refrigerators in my lab that are connecting online and are transmitting data. How do I assess, this kind of devices? So I think I've also touched on, outdated technology and hesitancy with adoption. Now, the hesitancy with adoption is because medical equipment is not cheap. I don't have the value, but some of these things are really, really expensive. That's all I can say. So I bring in that as a healthcare provider or as a hospital, I invest millions of dollars to buy a machine that, maybe a life-saving machine or whatever, or a heart rate monitor or anything. And then it's a cybersecurity engineer, analyst, manager, director, whatever, comes and then tells me that device is not secure. I need to upgrade, or I need to junk it and buy another one. How do I process that? That definitely would be hesitation to adopt, that solution. But this is why we need to kind of shift left. It needs to start early, So, which is one of the things we always push for is that cybersecurity is looped in right from the very start. It's always a huge struggle, and this is applicable anywhere. So, like the procurement process, you want to buy a specific solution for an organization. Maybe it's a bank, maybe it's the healthcare, anywhere. You need to gather your relevant stakeholders and let them know right from the start. Cybersecurity as well. So they can do the evaluation of all the solutions and say, does this introduce any new risk to our environment? Are we going to be able to update it, firmware updates, security updates, etc., or not? Okay, let's move on. So here are a few examples of breaches that happened in the US. The first was Healthy Kids, and these are recent. I'd say recent because they all happened in this is 2021 breaches. This first one is Florida Healthy Kids Corporation, and it affected 3.5 million records. An analysis found that significant vulnerabilities had been present on the Children's Health Insurance Program website since 2013, potentially leading to the exposure of personal information such as social security numbers, dates of birth, names, addresses, financial information. They basically had a site, and once again, because it's healthcare, their primary objectives are to provide health services. Oh, they needed a website or something, and they got a vendor to do it. The vendor delivered on the project and moved on with their lives. This also ties back to what I was saying before. If you had looped in cybersecurity, or you had cybersecurity as part of that process, they would know that it's not a one-time thing. You need to monitor this. You need to patch, and update as frequently as possible. You need to scan, do periodic reviews and assessments to detect the vulnerabilities. But that's it. And we can see the far-reaching impact. 3.5 million is not a small number. The other one is St. Joseph's. And this was ransomware, one of many ransomware incidents that they've had. No, not them in particular, but I mean like hospitals and healthcare facilities that they've had. And the solution for ransomware is pretty much easy. Well, once you have the right endpoint detection and response solution in place, you're pretty much good to go. I mean, of course, there's lots of awareness that also comes with that, and because most of it comes in through what do you call it, phishing and social engineering attacks. Let's move on. Now, this was an interesting story. This is a vulnerability that was identified on, I'll call it a smart device. This is basically a robot. And the robot was built to do several things. it can administer drugs, it has a camera, so it can move around the hospital. It can go from patient A to patient B. It can basically, it was connected to the network. It was brilliant. It was supposed to limit physical interaction. So a doctor or a healthcare practitioner didn't have to go to the wards to do several things. He could sit wherever he was and just, remotely control this guy, maybe use the microphone and the speakers on it as well to speak with you. And this was compromised. So, so when it's compromised, an attacker can delay the delivery of critical patients' medication. So maybe it's been programmed to deliver every 3 hours medication to a particular patient, or you can, tamper with that. The attacker can take control of the robot's movement. And I saw a demo where he, let's say we'll talk about the reason why this was possible in the first place. Default credentials, or I think it was even the lack of an authentication mechanism. So once the attacker was able to find the server where the application managing this robot was hosted, he was able to control it. But that is like the heights of privacy breach, because it's like, tell me you are in a hospital without telling me you're in a hospital. And you have this robot right here. You have access to it. You have its eyes. You can see everybody. You can see the doctors. You can see the patients. You can hear their conversations. You can capture their speech. You also have access to the server. You have access to the files. You have the configuration files on this guy. You have medical records of staff. And, you can move it around as well. So I don't know what damage you can do with that, but you can, you can do several things, with it. So, and, not to make excuses. I mean, I always like to look at, two sides of every situation. Those of us who are security practitioners always say, we want everybody to jump on our security bandwagon. And yes, we do. And it needs to start early. But we also kind of need to understand where others are coming from. If you have a condition or you have the need to go to a hospital, the first thing on your mind is not whether they're encrypting your data. First of all, you want them to save your life. And I remember in 2016, I was riding my motorcycle in Lagos, in Victoria Island. This was after work. This was about 6:37. I was leaving the island. I was going to Lekki. I was doing about maybe 80 kilometers an hour. And somebody comes from nowhere and knocks me down. So there I am flying in the air. I land on my left shoulder. And when I hit the ground, I knew that something was broken. A couple of people came and took me to the hospital. Trust me, at that time, I couldn't have been bothered with whether they were doing user access reviews or whether they were encrypting their data or anything like that. So, and that is their own perspective too. Like, I'm a doctor, I spent how many years studying medicine. I'm not interested. I mean, it's not, obviously now they are, but originally that wasn't the case. It was just like, oh, let's save this person's life. Let's take these notes and all of that. But now we need to make sure that they are aware. So there's so much work for us in the cybersecurity field, basically from awareness. I mean, I think in Europe and America, the eyes have really been opened, and because they're the major victims. And unfortunately, in Africa, we're still taking our time, but we have regulators who are, waking up and stepping up and pushing these things forward. Well, just to conclude all this talk, there are a few recommendations I'd say, and I'll also say you can take this anywhere, really. So, meaning it's not necessarily in the healthcare industry. You can perform self audits, self-assessments. If you were to take a new role, let's start a new job as a security analyst, security engineer, usually you would have like a 30-day plan or whatever. And performing those self-assessments is usually one key thing that I would, advise, even as part of a continuous process. Perform self-assessments, see what is missing, use a standard, use a guideline, use best practices. Do we have this? Do we do this? There's so many guides to help you do that. Also, have a remediation plan in place, because when those assessments happen, you will find things. There is no organization that is without vulnerabilities. If you think you're standing, you need to take heed because you might fall. We've seen it happen so many times. We've heard about the Target breach. The other day was Twitter, the almighty Twitter. And just last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, even Uber. Every day, there's one breach or the other. So there will always be vulnerabilities. We always need to be a step ahead. And then also you need to develop and implement your policies, your procedures, that guide the activities, that you perform, your security activities, assessments, etc. Also, you need to have all the necessary documentations, maybe even for regulatory purposes or standard requirements. There is a very key one, which is this business associate management. We can also look at it at third-party management or vendor management. Vendors are a huge risk to our environment because a lot of them are forgotten. And like I said earlier, they come in, you give them access, you don't know when they go, or you don't even know what they're doing with that access. So you need to periodically review those things. Another thing you would need to do is to even like in your agreements with them, set out those responsibilities, what they do, what they need to do, even from a security perspective, cyber hygiene. If you also need to change passwords often and things like that, you need to let them know, and you need to make it contractual. And incident management is also really huge, really huge. You need to know how to manage your incidents. You need to know what regulators expect of you. So like if something happens, do I need to report, and who do I need to report to? Internally, who do I need to notify? What teams do I need to notify? Is it just the cybersecurity team? Is it the engineering team? Do I need to report it to legal? And, things like that. So I think at this juncture, I'm going to say this is pretty much the end of my presentation. I am very open to taking questions. Thank you very much for your patience and for taking your time to listen to me.
Okay, thank you so much, Shola. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. So we're just waiting for questions. If you have any questions, just in the chat box, drop that and he'll respond to that. But thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. A lot of people said they could relate to it as a first day at work. Feels like a first day at work. Thank you so much. While we're waiting for questions, please feel free to connect with Shola on LinkedIn. I take it it's still going to be Olusola over there. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. So it's Olusola Ayodele. Although, like he said, his name is Shola, not Mr. Shola. So when you reach out, drop a message, don't go with "Good day, Mr. Shola."
Yes, please. Just a hi or a hello, Shola, is fine.
All right. So it was a beautiful presentation, and I think specifically for Sure, could you stop sharing your screen for a minute? All right. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so it was a good presentation generally, and I think I learned some very important points. And these are things that, like the fellows are saying, it feels like a very first day at work. Just the thought of how a little vulnerability here, a little vulnerability there can just come together and just make a massive cyber attack. And the previous, for example, with the robots. And I think this vulnerability exists, several places, especially in the health industry. And I'm sure that a lot of people on the call here have gotten interested in specifically becoming cybersecurity experts in the health industry. A couple of messages there indicated that. So thank you so much, Shola, for that. I'm waiting for questions. Any questions, anyone? All right, questions have come in finally. This person says, how far back do you think African countries, there's a grammatical error, but basically the person wants to know, are we doing better or worse given the current state of the healthcare system than we were doing a few years ago? And they'd like to know what has been done so far within the African community. So I know that that's a very ambiguous question, but to sum it all, just something around the processes that have been put in place over time. A singular example could help. Thank you.
No, to be honest, it's actually a very brilliant question, and it's hard to it's kind of hard to answer it, because in some areas and in some countries where some countries are doing well, and some others are really not bothered by everything that is happening. But the most improvement we see it is in the private sector. So sometimes, my organization needs to partner with, hospitals or other institutions for clinical studies and things like that. And sometimes I actually get brilliant questions around our security practices and even what they do. The first time I jumped on a call with the medical director in one of the hospitals in Lagos. I expected him to know nothing, but he was brilliant. He understood the need for security. He spoke about his firewalls. He spoke about the controls they had in the cloud for their data. He spoke about encryption, and he was a medical doctor. He also had a tech team. I mean, he didn't have specifically somebody for cybersecurity, but he had people who kind of doubled on those roles. So like I said, and I mean, if you take, for example, 54 Gene as well, we're definitely, stepping up. Or not just chilling. I mean, I've seen in lots of labs where they don't have any security personnel, but like where I work, it's not just me, it's actually a whole team. There's an analyst, there are analysts, there are engineers, there's a risk and compliance team. And that's how serious some of us take it. So we hope to preach this kind of messages, make people aware of the threats that are out there, and then the need to have security professionals to come and secure their data and the environment. So we're still way behind, and the regulators really need to step up their game and drive this thing. So yeah, that's the answer I'd give.
All right. So is this something, as a current cybersecurity enthusiast and fellow, that they can do in their own community to help push this growth? Is there any advice you can give on how they can contribute to this growth, or it's mostly just a regulator bit?
Sorry, can you take that again? I think I missed.
All right. So a fellow wants to know if there's something they can do in their own niche to help facilitate this growth, or is just strictly a compliance regulators thing?
Well, from like a voluntary perspective, if as an individual you feel you have knowledge to share, and you feel you want to approach an organization, I mean, this is the kind of initiatives that I believe CyberSafe jumps into, and I mean, I've seen it happen a lot of time where as an organization, you try to reach out and educate several groups of people, target groups and things like that. As an individual, over here, it's something we also do. We encourage, we have their groups over here that have awareness material, and they encourage you to go into the community and go to schools and go to different sectors and, preach the message of cybersecurity, awareness and the need for security. So as an individual, yes, you can contribute your own quota to it. but looking at the bigger, I mean, the impact would definitely be way bigger if a government were to put their foot down and say, okay, this is what we expect of you. These are the controls we expect you to put in place.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. Please, let's keep the questions coming. I think I can only take one more before we exit. But while we wait for the next question, Shola, would you like to just share any other platform you like us to follow you on, or anything you're currently working on that we can, support?
Quite frankly, I think LinkedIn for professional purposes is where I am most active. I mean, I do have a Twitter account, but I'm not very active on Twitter. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, no trouble. So people wanted to would like to follow for the bands though on Twitter. All right. So okay. So I think we're done. I think we're done. No more questions coming.
Oh, there's one more question, I think.
Just so that, yes. How can one maintain cyber hygiene in a hospital or healthcare center?
Okay, so like I'd say this really doesn't, it's not specific to the hospital. And like I said, there are like frameworks, there are guidelines that you can follow, there are methodologies that you can follow, and they're just very simple practices that you can do. So take, for example, the example I cited, like if you have users that connect to a system, you'd need to do those kind of user reviews periodically, because people come, people go. So what's happening to their access? If you have systems in your environment that are connected to the internet, how do you secure that? Do you have firewalls? Do you have rules? Do you have intrusion prevention systems? If you are keeping critical data, entering them on systems, on laptops, into servers, do you have endpoint security? Do you do cybersecurity awareness? Do your staff even know about it? If they received a malicious email today, would they be able to decipher, would they be able to tell that this is not from my medical director, this is definitely a phishing email? So, there's really a whole lot that you can do to maintain cyber hygiene. And then you also need to make it business as usual. It needs to be a continuous process. It's not a one-off thing. It's not just an audit that you do and wait till the same time next year. It needs to happen. There are things that need to happen daily, things need to happen weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually.
All right, thank you so much. Should I just take this? Okay, really quickly. So with recent introduction of IoT in the health sector, how can data security be applied here in Africa? Is that something you can take really quickly?
Yes, definitely. So with IoT, it's a bit tricky. Let's say IoMT, because in the medical field, we're talking about Internet of Medical Things. And to be honest with you, we're still struggling with the Internet of Things because of the volume of data they collect, the uniqueness of the technology. Even in Europe and America, we still have several organizations that are coming up with security standards to build around IoT devices. And now we're taking it to the medical, to the medical field. But still, there are some basic things that we can do to ensure that that those things are safe. There was an example that I skipped out giving, and this was somebody gave a talk at one of the Black Hat conferences, and there was a medical device. It was I think it's a heart rate monitor. So basically, it sends real-time updates to the doctors and the nurses to say, this is how this person's heart is doing. So, I mean, we all see the movies where, the machine kind of flatline and just go, pee, the guy has gone. So, and he told them that the machine was vulnerable and they didn't, they didn't understand it. And then he had to pretty much breach it. So what he did was, it was transmitting data over an insecure network. And he started sniffing with Wireshark. As he was able to sniff the packets, he was able to get like the username and password, logged in, and then started altering the data. So what he did was that he would pretty much shut down the communication from that heart rate monitor to the personnel, and then start feeding his own packets. He would capture the good packets saying that, oh, this person's heart is all good. And then when it was bad, he would replay the good packets, meaning your patient is dying, but you are seeing that he's alive and doing well. So, really, these are the challenges that we have. But I mean, it's very simple. If you use proper protocols to encrypt your network traffic, nobody will be able to sniff and tamper with it.
Oh, wow, thank you so much. I think that's a perfect example. So when you are sitting and thinking about how this can play out and how it can affect people and how you can contribute to making sure this doesn't happen, just replay this example in your head, and I'm sure you see all of the ways you can help solve this problem. So thank you so much, Shola. We really look forward to having you sometime again, and obviously look forward to connecting on social media with you. I'm sure a lot of people will be reaching out. Thank you so much. This was an impactful session, and well, there was a lot to learn. So thank you very much. Till we come our way again next time, just share some love in the comment section for Shola. Sorry, I nearly had a mix up there. So show some love to Shola in the chat box. Thank you so much. All right, so we've come to the end again of yet another cybersecurity masterclass with CyberSafe Foundation. Please connect with Shola. Research into how the role you can play in bettering the health sector through cybersecurity. How we can best practices that doctors, nurses, patients, and every other person can adopt to make it a better and safer space for all. Till I come your way again next time, my name is Ditiam Tawum, and see you next time. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.